Seems like we're making the transition. A lot of people carry a paper Bible, and a lot of people are carrying a Bible that shows up on their phone or on an iPad or whatever. And if that is the case, and you've got a digital Bible, we do have Wi-Fi, so you can get onto that. You can just look up Antioch Guest, I believe, is what it is. And then the password is in your bulletin. You'll never guess what it is. Sorry, this... Do I need to tell a joke so everybody kind of lighten up for a minute? I don't know. We're just like, we're awful. Well, we're in church. We have to be somber and sober. Okay. Well, here, I got just this. I need a volunteer real quick. Somebody just raise your hand. That'll help me out with a good joke. Okay, Josh, I got a great joke here. It's my son. It's a knock-knock joke, but you have to start it, okay? And I really didn't expect him to do this. So go ahead. You start.
Knock, knock.
Who's there? All right, here we go. Now, I am glad that you guys came today. I really didn't know he was going to raise his hand, but that worked pretty well. As you guys are aware, for the last month, we have been in a kind of a series that has fit underneath the core theme of the year, which has been core training. And the theme for kind of this series was lead like Jesus. And so throughout the course of it, what we have done is that we have been looking at leading as Jesus leads. And I think one of the things that we've discovered is that all of us in one arena or in one area of our lives, we are leaders, okay? Especially when we begin to understand what leadership is. Leadership is a process of influence, okay? Whenever we seek to influence the actions, the attitude, or the growth of another person in accomplishing goals, whether they're personal or professional goals, whenever we do that, we have taken on the role of a leader. And so I think with that being said, we know that we're all leaders in one aspect or another. It may be in our community, it may be at our work, it may be in our church, it may be, in our homes. But the thing is that one of the things to understand about, when we look at that interpretation of leadership, I think it's important that we realize who we are leading, but also why we are leading them. Because, there's all kinds of different leadership methods. There are all kinds of, methods of communication. But what we find is that not all of them work when you're trying to lead people that you love and you care about, okay? And when we're talking about influence, that's really what it is. Whether whether you're talking about an employee, you want to make that employee into the best possible employee they can be, or maybe the best possible civic leader or a church leader, or maybe you're talking about your kids. And you want to raise your kids and you want to influence them to be the best possible followers of Jesus that they can be. I think that's the goal of anybody as a leader, is that we want to have an influence on the attitude, the actions, the growth of someone that we love, that we care about, in an effort to help them accomplish goals. And like I said, whether it's professional or personal doesn't matter, but that's what we're wanting to do. And so it changes things when they are people that we love and we care about. I mean, like I said, there's lots of methods, and there's methods of leadership, and they're about nothing more than just getting your stuff done. But when we understand who it is that we're leading and why we're leading them, and when it's those that we care about and love, it should change the methods. And what we have found is, out of all of those, the most effective, the most loving, the both short-term and long-term method of leadership is the method and the model of leadership that Jesus gave us an example of. It is the most effective that we have. And so that's the reason that we have been looking through this series of Lead Like Jesus. But throughout the course of this, you guys will remember, we have taken specific attributes and attitudes of leadership, and we kind of picked them apart and we've looked at them. Today I want us to kind of do something a little bit different, and that is to come back and we're going to look at this as a whole. And I want to kind of back up, take the 30,000 foot view and see the big picture. Because what we find is that big picture, the 30,000 foot view, is evidenced in a conversation that Jesus had with his disciples and with these followers. And it's in Mark. We're gonna be in Mark. It's also found in Matthew's gospel. We're gonna be reading in Mark, and so Matthew, Mark, second book of the New Testament. And if you don't know how to find it, open your Bible about halfway in the middle, and you'll probably be in Psalms, Proverbs, right around there. And then you divide that in half, and you're probably gonna end up in Matthew, Mark, Luke, somewhere around there. See, you thought you had to memorize books of the Bible. That's next week. No. This brings us, though, to this is our key verse. We're in Mark chapter 10, verse 45. Mark 10, 45 is where we're going to be. And this is our key verse that we're going to be memorizing this week, which says, "For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." Now, if you'll remember, earlier in our series, we have looked at this before. We talked about this passage, but kind of in the context of servant leadership. But today I want us to come back. We're really going to kind of dig into this, but we need to ask the question. I think it's always important whenever we read something to read it how? Context, context, context. So when Jesus says this, why is he saying it? Who is he saying it to? What was surrounding it when he made this statement? Excuse me. And so if you go back about 10 verses, what you find is Jesus had been telling the disciples about his impending suffering. Okay, he had been speaking to them, and at that point, these two brothers, James and John, they come to Jesus, and I love what they say. They say, "Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask." Okay, now Jesus is not one to get painted into a corner. He does not make commitments. He knows something's coming. So what is he? He goes, "Okay, what do you want me to do for you? What is it that you're asking?" And so they say, verse 37, "Let one of us sit at your right and the other at your left in your glory." And I kind of read this. It'd be a little presumptuous, isn't it? I mean, I get to thinking, I read that sometimes and it makes me cringe, kind of in the same way that I cringe when I take my kids, to somebody's house, or to a neighbor or a friend or a family, and they've got some cool toy, or they've got some new they got a four-wheeler, or they've got something, and my kids walk in the door 2 seconds and they're like, "Can I drive it? Can I play with it? Can I have it? Can I?" And you're just like, just wait until you're asked. Okay, don't we? Isn't that how we do it? Okay. Well, I kind of see James and John, they're the same way. They're like, "Hey, we're going to jump in this. So, hey, we want you to just do for us whatever we're going to ask. We want to sit at your right and your left." And now, the thing is, though, that I think we need to understand, because we wonder sometimes, where in the world did this come from? But if you go back just to Matthew chapter 19, you find the answer, because Jesus had been teaching the disciples, and he had told them that, this was after the rich young ruler, and he says that, those who have left all of this stuff will end up, they will be seated on 12 thrones judging the 12 tribes of Israel. And so he's really directed that to them. So, James and John they're kind of laying claim to a promise that Jesus had already made. They're just trying to kind of get ahead of it. And so, the reason that the other disciples get so upset, let's be honest, is because they didn't think to ask first. I mean, that's really what it is. They're upset. It's, "Oh, I can't believe you." No, I can't believe you asked that before I got a chance to ask it. And so, but I think we need to keep in mind, doesn't this fly in the face of everything that Jesus had taught? Jesus said that we were to, when we go to a banquet, to sit where? Sit in the lowest spot, so that then the master of the banquet would come and would move you up. But here you've got James and John, these two brothers coming. They're saying, "Hey, we want the best spots, so sit us there." And so obviously Jesus says no. It says you don't know what you're asking, and there's kind of this back and forth. But I want us to to kind of jump ahead, and we're going to skip his direct response to James and to John and go to what he teaches all of the disciples. And so at this point, he gathers them all together. And, as you look at this, what you realize when this happens, time is running short. Jesus is running out of time for teaching. The cross is looming on the horizon. And so he sits the disciples down and very clearly begins to teach them, and honestly brings everything together. I think in many ways, he brings so much of this together of what he has been teaching for the last 3+ years, the entire time that they have been following him. And so he tells the disciples, beginning in verse 42, he says, "You know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them." Now, we read that, and who do you think that he's talking about when he says that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles? We think a lot of times those who are in charge, okay, those who are the rulers, or those that the people recognize as rulers. And that's actually, that is one group that Jesus is talking to. But there's really, if you go and you look at the original Greek really kind of gives us a little bit different angle on this, because what that would actually read is that those who give the impression or who have the reputation of ruling. Another way of saying it would be those who consider themselves to be rulers, those who present themselves as rulers. That's really who he's talking about here. And there's a great example of this in 2 Samuel. King David had a variety of sons. Absalom was one of his sons. And Absalom, go back and look it up. It's kind of a cool story. Well, it's a cool story, but it's also an eye-opening account. But Absalom is basically exiled. He's sent away by his father David. And then he ends up and he comes back, but he's still kind of kept at arm's length. But Absalom wanted, more than anything, Absalom wanted to be king. Okay? And so what he did is that he hires 50 men to go ahead of him wherever he goes. So every time he gets in his chariot, 50 men right ahead of him. And then he would go to the city gates on a daily basis, and he would sit at the city gates. And whenever people came and they had a claim or any kind of a dispute that they wanted to bring before the king, then Absalom would greet him first and basically say, well, your claim is valid, and I wish there was somebody here that would listen to it, but they're not, so I'll do it. And as a result, what he ended up doing was he won the hearts of the people of Israel. He won the hearts of the soldiers of Jerusalem. And as a result, he eventually staged a coup, became king, declared himself king, and banished his father, David. And so in other words, Absalom really wanted to be king, so he made himself look like a king, and eventually he became the king. And we see this a lot. You think about it. Throughout the course of this political cycle, right now with the election coming up, what you will hear many times, especially in the presidential, is that they need to look presidential. Either somebody does look presidential or doesn't look presidential or needs to look presidential. It's like this idea that if you look like it, then you can be it type deal. And so people do. Many times they try to present themselves as something. We also see it not just in the desire to get into power, but those who then will do whatever it is to stay in power. When they start responding to polls rather than what needs to be done, they get more worried about, I think a lot of times, clinging to power rather than using the power that has been given to them to serve. And I'm not saying that everybody is like that, but it does seem that a lot of our elected officials are more concerned with staying elected than they are doing what they were elected for, and we see that play out a lot. Have you ever heard the phrase political capital? That's a great example of political capital. Is the whole idea that you're popular enough that you can do things that are unpopular, but still have enough popularity to get things done or be elected or be reelected. So you spend some political capital, okay? It's all an effort to stay in power. And it's not just politics. We see it in business as well. You see it in the business world where you got men and women who become, for lack of a better word, they become yes men. You know, that they will just, yes, sir, whatever, sir, yes, sir, so that they can stay in the position that they are. Or people that will, manipulate or force themselves into positions of leadership just because they want to be a leader, okay? And so you see it in business. You see it in politics. Honestly, you see it in churches. I mean, there are pastors that will not address particular subjects because they're too controversial. I mean, you see it. You see it in the form of whether it is pastors or whether it is other leaders that kind of believe in keeping the status quo. Because if you don't rock the boat, nobody falls out. And, so we see this all the time in different scenarios. But that's, Jesus says here, and he addresses it in verse 43, says, not so with you. Okay? Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be slave of all. In other words, don't try to look the part. Don't try to just look the part. And one of the things he's saying, Jesus is saying, they've got it all wrong. Because what Jesus knew is something that we need to learn, and that is, those who desire to present themselves as rulers are ruled by their desire to be seen as rulers. For our world, for our times, those who desire to be seen as leaders are often ruled by their desire to be seen as leaders. Those who many times who desire to be leaders become ruled by that desire to become a leader. And does that mean that we can't aspire to anything? Does it mean that we can't have any ambition? Does it mean that we shouldn't try? No, that's not what it's talking about at all. Matthew Henry, I love this, in his concise commentary of the Bible, he puts it this way. And it should be, worldly honor is a glittering thing with which the eyes of Christ's own disciples have many times been dazzled. Our care must be, listen to this, that we may have wisdom and grace to know how to suffer with him, and we may trust him to provide what the degrees of our glory shall be. I think that, we need to remember what it means to be a leader, but we all, that it's about influence, the process of influence, but we also need to bounce that up against what the Bible defines and describes as a leader. There is nothing wrong with seeking to influence the actions, the attitude, the behavior of someone that we care about in order to help them in accomplishing personal or professional goals. Nothing wrong with that. What Jesus does say there's something wrong with is that when we want to be a leader so we will be seen as a leader, that's wrong. That's not what we are supposed to be doing. And so then he continues, and the reason that we know what a leader is supposed to look like, the reason that I'm sorry, my little thingy clipped off here, and it's going to start sliding down the back of my neck. I know it any minute. I heard it. The reason that we know that this is true as we're reading it, the reason that we know what a Christian leader should look like is because Jesus told us what a Christian leader is supposed to look like. And at the end of this conversation, he says this, verse 45, "For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many." Even the Son of Man, even Jesus, did not come to be served, but to serve. And so over the last month, we've been looking at what? We've been looking at different aspects of Jesus' leadership style, of different things that he does. But one of the things to understand, there's not a single one of those that was intended to be standalone. None of those are complete on their own. okay? They were not intended to be the one way to lead. It's an encapsulation. And I think that's where this is so important. It's the reason this message comes at this point. And that is because all of those, when they are combined, come back around and give us really what is Jesus' biography. Isn't it? That he did not come to be served, but to serve. That's his leadership style. Every one of these that we have looked at all wraps up into that. This is the encapsulation of his leadership style. And I think that we need to understand it. It's not, who loves buffets? I love a buffet. And I love a good buffet for a couple of reasons. Number one, I can't believe not more people like buffets. That really bothers me. I don't know. You guys. No, but one of the things I love about a buffet, is when you go someplace, not just the fact that you can go back for seconds, thirds, fourths, fifths, sixths, whatever. But the fact that if something doesn't sound good to me, if something doesn't look good to me, I don't have to take any of it. I can double up on the thing I like, but I don't have to take the thing I don't want. So salad, nope. We're going to meat. But the thing is that here's the deal. That works great at the buffet, but that is not what God calls us to as followers of Christ. That's not what he calls us to in leadership. We've looked at these different attributes over the course of the last month, but the fact is that it is not our decision to say, oh, you know what, I really like that shepherding thing. That is great, but service, no, I'm going to double up on shepherding. Let somebody else take care of the serving. It doesn't work that way. It's not up to us to be able to come along and say, oh man, I'll tell you what, humility, got it. I am rocking the humility. I'm the greatest, most humble person there is. No, isn't that? No, but we're not allowed to come there and say, I like this, but I'm going to leave that to somebody else. I'm going to double up on this. I'll do this. Oh, this is really great. There are some of them that are going to be harder on us. There's some of them that are going to come natural to us. That's just the way it is. Okay? God has made us all to where we have different things, and there are some of those attributes, they come more naturally to us. They are easier for us to incorporate into our lives. There's some of them that we're going to have to work on, that we're going to struggle at, and we're going to get better, and then we're going to get worse, and we're going to try it again and again. But that's what we're called to do, is to work on all of those, because when we take all of the leadership styles that we have looked at and we combine them, what do we come up with? The fact that just as the example of Jesus, even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. Now, I'm not saying that we are here and that we're supposed to now die on a cross. No, that's not what I'm talking about at all. But what I am saying, though, is that we are to serve instead of being focused on being served. And so I want to kind of look here at a couple, like I said, the attributes that we had done. Everything Jesus teaches, look, it goes completely opposite to what most of us were probably taught in many ways. We may have been taught a lot of these things in Sunday school, but if you go out into the world, okay, you go out into the workforce or anything, or I don't care, school sports or anything else, everything that Jesus teaches is polar opposite to what the world tries to tell us. Now, why did Jesus go against the grain? Was it, when it came to leadership style and all that, was it because he wanted to be seen as a visionary, or he wanted to buck the system? Or was it because his way is the best way? It's because his way is the best way. Because he understands that leadership is not about position, it is about the process of influence, that taking on that role is about influencing, guiding people that we love, that we care about, to be better people. In whatever aspect. Like I said, whether you're talking about business or church or civic or in our very own home. And so that is why he models this leadership method, and it's the most effective, it is the most empowering, it is also the most sustainable Okay, short term, long term, most effective that we're going to find. And so I want to go back real quick, though, and look at what we learned from this series and the ways that Jesus led so that we can combine all these together. Number one, we've learned that Jesus led by example. There is no distance program for shepherding, okay? Shepherds live among the sheep. That's what they do. They live, they walk, they spend their time with the sheep. There is no remote shepherding that happens out there. And I think that's one of the things we find by Jesus is the example that in his shepherding, he was among us. He spent time with us. And I think the thing that we need to understand is that you can't lead by example if those you are attempting to lead cannot see your example. You can't lead by example if those you are leading cannot see and experience your example. Jesus led by example, and those who were around him saw and experienced his example. There is nothing more infuriating. There is nothing more depressing than to be told, no. Do as I say, but not as I do. We've all heard it, haven't we? It is just, it goes all over us. We see it. We see it in business. We see it in politics. What would happen if our elected officials had the same laws, rules, regulations, guidelines that we have? That's one of the big frustrations you hear out around the country right now. But I think that's when you talk about leading by example, you can't lead by example if those that you're trying to lead can't see and experience your example. And so that happens when if we're talking about shepherding, we're going to have to be among the sheep, among those that we are leading, whether that's in our community, whether that is in our churches, whether that is in our home. But, we need to learn how to lead as shepherds, which means that we need to learn how to serve instead of being, served. That you lead to serve, not to be served. And Jesus led with humility. I know servant leadership is all the rage now. It's the buzzword. Everybody hears it. Everybody knows it. Bear in mind, there were a lot of people talking about humility when Jesus was walking the earth, but there was nobody else that was living it and modeling it as a leader. Okay? The leaders of the time would tell everybody else to be humble, but they were not. And so here comes Jesus, and he just turns all of this upside down. You think about it, we talked about this. Here is Jesus, God in the flesh, who stepped down out of heaven, took on human form. Why? To die on the cross for our sins. He gave up divine entitlements. And if he would give up those divine entitlements to save us, to redeem us, who are we to think that we're entitled to anything? It's kind of, Jesus becoming even king of the earth is about akin to any president of the United States being elected as president of their glee club. You're thinking about sorry, it's nothing against glee clubs. It was just an example that came up. But think about it. You talk about that difference of that lowering and being, how many presidents would be willing to say, you know what, and I'm completely good with that, and I love it, and I'm excited about it, I'm going to give it everything I've got. Okay? Yet Jesus, King of Kings, Lord of Lords, Creator of heaven and earth, stepped down out of heaven and took on the form of a servant for us. He served. And it's been said many times, and I will say it again, though. If you want to look like Jesus, you need to learn how to serve. If you want to look like Jesus, you need to learn how to serve. And it's not just serving those that you like. Jesus served those that betrayed him. He served those that lied about him. He served those that cursed at him, that spit on him, those that drove nails in his hands. Service is serving those even that can't do anything for us. You see Jesus hanging around with tax collectors and prostitutes and lepers and spending time with them and serving them. They couldn't do anything for him. But that wasn't why he came. He didn't serve to get something back out of it. Okay? He served because that's what he came to do. And so, in order to lead as Jesus, I think we need to serve. If you think about this, how can we claim to be the hands and feet of Jesus if we will not help those that he came to help, if we will not go to those that he came to save? We can't. Jesus led by teaching. The old saying is those who can do and those who can't teach. And that's not disparaging teachers. There's a lot of teachers that have a heart for it. Okay? They are mentors. At the same time, there are teachers that it's a job, right? We've probably all witnessed them. I mean, there are those that it's just, this is my job. Okay? And that shows. But those who truly have a heart for it, you see it. Most of them, they want to influence. They want to have an impact on somebody, of raising them to be the best young man, young woman, grow up to accomplish things with their life. That is their goal in it. And it's seen. I don't think that you'd have a hard time finding anybody, okay, who is well respected, okay, successful and well respected in their field that does not have the heart of a teacher. That's how you get there. Is because you're willing to teach and to mold and to guide others, and that's where and that's what mentoring is. They say mentoring to those who can teach. They're willing to set aside their time. They're willing to set aside their effort and to teach someone else and to help them accomplish their goals. And Jesus led by refusing to give up. Stick-to-itiveness we talked about. And faith is all about perseverance, isn't it? Faith is all about continuing on even when everything says to quit. And really this, stick-to-itiveness, perseverance, whatever you want to call it, it is all about, I think above anything, it is learning to listen to the right voice. Because the world is going to scream at you to quit. The world's going to scream to give up. That you're never going to amount to anything. And God whispers in our ear, no. You have infinite value in my eyes. Keep going. Keep pushing through. The world's going to scream at us that it'll never make a difference, that it doesn't ever matter. And God comes along and he whispers to us and he said, no. You matter. And everything you do matters. It's going to come along and say, no, you ain't got it in you. You can't do it. You'll never accomplish it. And our Heavenly Father comes along and he whispers in our ear and he says, no, you have me in you and there is nothing that I cannot do. Perseverance comes from us listening to the right voice and being able to push through. Jesus modeled that in everything that he did. Even when it seemed like everything was stacked against him, he went through. And I think that probably more than anything, perseverance is understanding that more than anything else, the mission is more important than the method. Okay? There's different methods that we got out there. But perseverance is when things change, understanding that the mission is more important than the method. And then allowing the method to be driven by the mission. That's what creates perseverance. That's what creates that stick-to-itiveness to push through and to come out on the other side. And so, the question is, why should we live this way? Any thoughts? Why should we? Because he did. You jumped me. Because he did. The fact that Jesus was willing to take on human form and live among us is not just an example to us. It's not just a topic for a sermon. Okay, it is what he did for us. And so as a result, his desire to shepherd should lead us to shepherd others. We should look at his example, realize what he did, and it should lead us to want to shepherd and to guide others. His willingness to give up everything that he was entitled to come to us, to save us, to redeem us, should drive us to an attitude of humility that we should drop to our knees, understanding it ain't about us. It is all about him, and that the most important thing is to continue to further his kingdom and to accomplish his will and his mission. The fact that he taught, you read the Bible, and the reason that we know so much about what Jesus taught, about what he meant, about everything else is why? Because he discipled 12 men for 3+ years. And because of what he taught them, because of what he poured into them, they then poured it into others, who poured it into others, who poured it into others. And you and I sit here today as recipients of that promise because somebody poured it into us. And that should drive us to want to go out and pour it into others, to guide, to lead them, to teach them to obey everything that God has commanded us to do as well. Jesus' perseverance is, I want you to think about this for a second. If somebody had sat down, 2,000 years ago, the night of Jesus' birth, and would have told you in a story, hey, here's what's going to happen to this baby. He's going to grow up, and in 30 years, he's going to go into the ministry. Everybody's going to be against him. Everybody's going to come against him. For 3.5 years, he is going to have the world trying to stop him. And then eventually, they're going to arrest him. There's going to be this false trial. It's just going to be a farce. They're going to beat him. They're going to crucify him. They're going to bury him. But on the third day, he's going to come back again. I think what a lot of us would have said was, is there a reason it has to take so long? Can you not just do this now? I mean, if you're going to do it, why do we have to wait this 33 years? Why does all this suffering, all this pain have to happen? Can we not just jump right to the glorious, victorious resurrection? Can we just go there? If that was the case, would you and I truly comprehend the depth of God's love for us? If he was not willing to push through everything that he pushed through, would we truly understand what he was willing to give up for us? Would we truly understand the price that was paid on our behalf? See, we look at the story, at Jesus' story, at Jesus' example, and it just screams to us the glory and the grace and the majesty of God. There are going to be difficult times. I think some of us, we're going through them now. And the fact is that even though we look and we don't see any way that we're going to get out of this, we don't see any way that it's ever going to get better, we don't see that things are ever going to change. When we look at the example of Jesus, we know that no matter what the world thinks, when the world thinks it's winning, God is in control. And God is driving this thing. When we look and we see those dark, dark days and wonder if they will ever end, we need to be willing to quit listening to the voices in the darkness and start listening to the voice of God whispering in our ear that says, I'm here with you every step of the way. The leadership example of Jesus pours into us, and we need to take it. And we need to receive it, but at the same time, it is about us understanding that it's bigger than us all the way along, and to pour it into others. I'm going to ask you to stand, and we're going to have our time of decision. And I just want to say, if you find yourself here today and you are struggling, you feel like you're carrying just a burden that you don't know what to do with, I'm going to invite you. I'm going to ask if Ron would just step into our side, into our prayer room. And if you would like to have somebody pray with you and pray for you, please just step in there. You don't have to say a word. All you got to do is say, I need prayer. Maybe you're here today and you've got a decision to make. You realize that you've just kind of been walking this walk and calling yourself a Christian, but you've never actually sought to claim that mantle of leadership and responsibility that God has given us. To influence the attitude, the actions, the growth of someone else to help them accomplish their personal goals in growing with Christ. And you want to make that decision today to step up and to assume that. I want to invite you to come down, and we would love to share that moment with you. Maybe you want to call me afterwards. That would be fine as well. But if you have a decision to make,